On this episode of China Uncensored, even a war on pollution can have casualties. Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. In 2014, China launched a war against pollution. But it's been tough. Turns out it's much easier to arrest dissidents than smog. Which is why Beijing police are now being armed with vacuum cleaners. Not for the smog, it's to knock out the dissidents. Makes it more challenging. But in terms of pollution, China has been pushing ahead. The Chinese Communist Party has said it wants to be a world leader in transitioning out of dirty energy and going green. For example, as northern China enters a freezing winter, the Ministry of Environmental Protection issued a vaguely worded notice to 28 cities to keep air pollution under control by speeding up the transition from coal to natural gas. Local officials began arresting people for burning coal. This propaganda banner literally says, "Whoever burns coal will be arrested." Okay, that's a little harsh. Maybe they could just put coal in your Christmas stocking as a warning. What's that, Shelley? They don't have Christmas stockings in China. Okay, well, never mind then. Arresting people is obviously the next logical step. But anyway, it sounds good. Stop people from burning that dirty coal. After all, we're talking about pollution so bad that a University of Chicago study found it takes 3 years off the average person's life in northern China. And in exchange, Chinese authorities promised they would transition everyone to natural gas. Just one small problem. In a lot of areas, authorities didn't get the pipes set up in time. So when people started getting arrested for using coal, they didn't have any alternative. Well, except to freeze, I guess. And in places where natural gas was available, massive shortages made prices skyrocket. According to Tencent, one senior couple secretly burned coal for heat and died of carbon monoxide poisoning due to poor ventilation. Even in areas where natural gas and electricity are available, low-income families complain that they are too expensive. Stories of people burning sticks and corn cobs to keep warm have been going viral on China's internet. So have photos of children having class outside in their coats, because at least you can't be arrested for letting the sun keep you warm. For now. As Bloomberg put it, all this became another example of how China's bureaucracy can sometimes subordinate common sense to centrally mandated goals. The success of central planning. Here's how it works in China. The central government issues a high-level policy directive, like reducing the number of coal-burning households by 1.8 million in Hebei province. They don't care how officials in Hebei do it, as long as it gets done. And since whether you meet the central government's goals is tied closely to whether you get promoted, local officials are motivated to do anything they can to meet numbers. As one official put it, local officials also don't want to get blamed for not meeting the target. Yes, fear is a powerful motivator, and sometimes officials get too motivated. Like in Hebei, where they decided to reduce the number of coal-burning households by 2.3 million instead of 1.8 million, exceeding expectations, by leaving people with no heat and triggering a natural gas shortage. The worst part, though, is that they made the central government look bad. So now the Hebei officials have been trotted out to, guess what? Take the blame. What a backfire. Sadly, that's the only kind of fire that won't keep you warm. Let's just hope it doesn't also backfire for Apple CEO Tim Cook. While he was in China this month, he said China's environmental leadership is very clear and it aligns completely with Apple's values. Sounds like Apple's values might be a tad rotten. Oh, and another thing. Most of China's coal pollution doesn't even come from individuals burning coal in their homes to keep warm. It mostly comes from power plants and factories. And it just so happens that more than 70% of factories don't meet China's air pollution standards. But instead of installing better pollution controls, factories have also been told to reduce or stop burning coal. So that also means a lot of factories have had to shut down or slow production. This has had a devastating effect on the economy. And worst of all, the shutdown of some chemical factories means they don't have what they need to make spandex. One industry executive even warned spandex will be tight. I see what you did there. How could there be such a big screw-up? Well, in addition to the inefficiency of top-down directives, part of the reason is that estimates for how much natural gas was needed were way off. That's because the Chinese regime routinely lies about GDP figures. There was a slump in growth from 2012 to 2016 that went unrecognized in official GDP statistics and may have contributed to planners' miscalculation of how much coal would need to be substituted by gas. Okay, so maybe flat out lying about your GDP has real-world consequences. Now, not to worry. The Communist Party has decided to show its benevolence and is no longer requiring people to freeze to death to meet pollution standards. In a double urgent letter, the Ministry of Environmental Protection told authorities in 28 cities to relax the coal ban at places. It reminded officials that they should continue to ensure that the number one principle should be keeping people warm in winter. An important clarification. Unfortunately, there's no word yet on whether spandex production has been restored. So what do you think of the ban and then unban of coal? Leave your comments below. Thanks for watching this episode of China Uncensored. Once again, I'm your host, Chris Chappell. See you next time. You know, I think spandex would look good on you. You know what else would? The truth. Head over to ChinaUncensored.tv where you can see full half-hour episodes of China Uncensored you can't see on YouTube. Learn about all the things the Chinese Communist Party doesn't want you to know.